Now, from now on, you and only you may call me Manly. Laura Elizabeth. Well, how does Beth sound?
The lovable little house on the prairie heroine Laura Ingalls. Do you recall her? On the show, her life was portrayed as a picture of simple delights and pleasant pioneer adventures. Laura Ingalls and Almanzo Wilder's true narrative, however, was far different from the beautiful one we seen on television. Tragedy, disease, and emotional distress beset them on their voyage. In light of the hardships that shaped their life away from the prairie, we are delving into the tragic tale of Laura Ingalls Wilder and Almanzo Wilder today. On February 7, 1867, Laura Elizabeth Ingalls came into our world. Charles Philip and Caroline Lake, her parents, welcomed her into a family that is steeped in history. Important figures in American history were acquainted with Laura. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who would go on to become the President of the U.S., was her relative. Edmund Ingalls, who emigrated to the United States from England in the distant past, was also a member of her family line. One of Laura's ancestors may have been a passenger on the ill-fated Mayflower, the ship that carried early Americans to the New World. Laura did not have a typical upbringing. Her ancestors were nomadic nomads, constantly seeking better opportunities. They departed from their Wisconsin home when Laura was just 2 years old. After a short time in Missouri, they moved to Kansas, where they settled in what was once known as Indian Territory, not far from the site of modern-day independence. The family's financial struggles and frequent migrations disrupted Laura's schooling. Nevertheless, her innate interest in and aptitude for studying went beyond her official education. Her mother, Caroline, instilled in her daughter the value of education via her career as a teacher. During the long winter nights, Laura's dad, Charles, would amuse the family with stories and fiddle music, which sparked her interest in storytelling. In her late teens, Laura started to emerge from her family's shadow and forge her own path in life. She had a reputation for being brave and witty. Her independence, shaped by her time spent teaching and working outside the house, was unique for women in her day. Later in life, while she was writing, these experiences of freedom would shape her characters into strong, competent women. Similarly, Laura's early childhood was characterized by strong bonds with her family. Mary, Carrie, and Grace were her sisters, and they were quite close to her. Laura acted as Mary's eyes when she was blinded by scarlet fever and gave Mary a detailed account of their surroundings. Because of this, Laura probably sharpened her powers of observation and description, which are what make her writing so interesting. Laura gained several useful talents from her time as a pioneer. She became adept in many agricultural tasks, including cooking, sewing, gardening, and more. Having these powers was something Laura was quite proud of, as they were crucial to her survival out on the frontier. Her early training as a homemaker and expert on rural life would earn her respect as an expert in her field later in life. When Laura and her family relocated to Kansas, her father had the bright idea of constructing a house on the property. Unfortunately, the family found out that the property actually belonged to the Osage, thus they were not allowed to remain. In 1871, they returned to Wisconsin after hearing reports that they could be compelled to leave. Laura learned a lot about flexibility and adaptability from her experiences living in a variety of locales. She encountered diverse individuals and seen diverse settings. She would subsequently use these events as inspiration for her mature fiction. During that 3-year period, the family remained in Wisconsin. Laura started to grasp the essence of being a pioneer at this period. Better prospects were continuously being sought after by Laura's family. As the United States expanded westward in search of land and economic opportunity in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many families adopted this lifestyle. Laura gained a wealth of unique experiences from her time spent living in numerous countries. She gained an understanding of many cultures and visited Native American reservations. She had to overcome obstacles, including relocating to different towns and constructing new houses. Later in life, she would compose stories that heavily included all of these occurrences. Laura started taking on more and more responsibility as she got older. She took her first teaching position in 1882, the year before she turned 16. Her classrooms were often so tiny that there was not enough room for all of the pupils. To put food on the table for her family, Laura undertook this job. Teaching was a viable profession for women in Laura's day, since there were few other options. Though she hated her profession as a teacher, she put in a lot of time and effort into it. It was important for her to assist her family, she realized. From 1883 until 1885, she was a teacher at 3 separate institutions. She had a side job as a dressmaker when she wasn't in the classroom. At the same time, she made an effort to complete her own education. She did not complete her high school education. The relocation to Smet, South Dakota was a watershed moment for Laura's family. Since Laura spent a significant portion of her adolescence and early adulthood here, the town took on a unique significance for her. New opportunities were presented to Laura and her family by Smet. There were several ways in which Laura helped out her family in Smet. While teaching, she put in long hours. Because her classroom was a one-room schoolhouse, she had to deal with pupils of varying ages and skill levels. In order to make sure that everyone understood, she had to be patient and inventive. Laura was able to supplement her income in ways other than teaching. She honed her sewing and design abilities while apprenticed to a seamstress. She would benefit from these abilities for the rest of her life. As a member of a frontier family, she mastered the skill of sewing and learning how to repair garments. The hardships of frontier life were another reality for Smet residents. Extremely chilly winters and scorching summers are possible. Everybody in town would have a tough time on bad harvest days. In order to get through the hard times, Laura and her family had to remain strong and together. Throughout her time at Smet, Laura matured from a girl into a young woman. Numerous lifelong abilities were ingrained in her during her time there. Over time, she gained self-reliance and self-assurance. She would go on to use her time in this place as inspiration for other novels. However, Laura did have some fun during her time in Smet. The opportunity to socialize and meet new people was also there for her. There were dances and get-togethers in town for the youth. Laura met her future husband at one of these gatherings. You won't want to miss this story. But before we do that, it would be beneficial to learn about Wilder's childhood as well. Burke is a tiny village in New York, not far from Malone, where Almanzo Wilder was born into a farming family. Many sources state that he was born on February 13, 1857, although census data from New York and the federal government indicate that he was really born in 1859. A subsequent choice he made in 1879, while claiming property in Dakota Territory under the Homestead Act, may explain why his birth year is unclear. In order to fulfill the age requirement of 21, which was necessary for staking claims, Wilder may have misrepresented his birth year as 1857. Born to James Mason Wilder and his wife, Wilder was the 5th of 6 children in a large and hard-working family. A lot of who Almanzo is now owes his strength of character and competence to the hard upbringing he had as a farm child growing up in rural New York. Laura Ingalls Wilder, his wife, wrote the renowned novel Farmer Boy based on her husband's background, especially his formative years spent farming. The events that take place in Farmer Boy Almanzo's story begin in 1866, shortly before Almanzo's 9th birthday. He spent his days split between school and helping out on the farm, as did many other youngsters his age. During planting and harvest times in particular, education frequently took a second place to the urgent demands of farm labor. Regardless, Wilder gained a lifelong appreciation for education as a result of this. Training and driving oxen was an important ability for a new farmer to have in that era, and it was one of his first successes on the farm. As a young man, Almanzo was able to feel the pleasures of rural life, in addition to the hardships of farm labor. As a youngster, going to the county fair was a rare escape from the monotony of farming and a great way to see the community come together. Also, Almanzo could marvel at the newest livestock competitions and agricultural advancements. The county fair is vividly shown in Farmer Boy, highlighting the significance of such gatherings for a rural boy's upbringing. As a young guy, Almanzo also experienced the patriotic 4th of July festival in Malone, which was a pivotal moment in his life. As the United States began to rebuild after the Civil War and prepare for growth and development, the mid-19th century was a time of tremendous transformation. These festivities gave a little child like Almanzo a taste of what life was like away from the farm. Almanzo had a difficult upbringing despite its share of happy memories. Because he was the youngest, he frequently found himself at odds with his elder siblings' dominance. Eliza Jane, his sister, was a major character in his childhood since she was a dominant personality who often looked after their younger siblings. Almanzo owes a great deal to the teachings in responsibility and self-control that Eliza Jane instilled in him. She went on to become a schoolteacher. When Almanzo was a little kid, the Wilder family chose to leave Burke in 1870 because farming in the region had become unsustainable owing to frequent crop failures. They followed the lead of many other families at the time and headed west in search of better possibilities. They began a new life as farmers after relocating to Spring Valley, Minnesota. Because it brought him into new settings and strengthened his bond to the land and farming, this migration was a watershed point in Almanzo's life. Taking on more and more responsibility as he matured, Almanzo's role on the farm expanded. It wasn't until 1879 that he was prepared to go out on his own. As a family, they uprooted and headed for the Dakota Territory, where people were starting to pour in, following in the footsteps of their older brother, Royal, and sister, Eliza Jane. Here, Almanzo laid claim to some land close to the future town of Smet in South Dakota. In addition to establishing a new farm, Almanzo's choice to travel westward was a component of the larger American movement of Manifest Destiny, in which several families yearned for better possibilities in the rapidly developing western lands. By this stage of his life, Almanzo had honed the resiliency and ingenuity that would be invaluable in the Dakota Territory's severe environment. Almanzo intended to produce wheat at Smet, since it was a profitable crop in the area. He was hopeful about his chances in this new region, since he had gained experience working rented property in Marshall, Minnesota the previous summer. The winter of 1880-1881, dubbed the Long Winter, was a watershed point in Almanzo's early existence in the Dakota Territory. The little town of Smet was shut off from food and other necessities due to the terrible blizzards and near-constant snowstorms. The settlers' lives were in danger due to the extreme weather, but Almanzo and a man from the village called Ed Cap Garland stepped up to the plate to save the town's inhabitants from going hungry. Bravely and with unwavering resolve, the two men embarked on a treacherous quest across the vast plains in pursuit of wheat. Rumor had it that a farmer to the southwest of Smet had gotten a few wheat harvests in before winter hit. Almanzo and Cap rode the 12 miles to get to him, braving the dangerous weather. Tensions ran high as they negotiated a price for 60 bushels of wheat from the farmer. This was more than enough to prevent the town's inhabitants from going hungry. The journey back to Smet was just as perilous, as they fought to pull the grain on sleds that would often become mired in the snow. A second 4-day blizzard was about to strike when they returned. The tale of Laura Ingalls and Almanzo Wilder is a touching account of love that triumphs against all odds. The earlier mentioned little hamlet of Smet, South Dakota, where their trip started, would later play a pivotal role in their common history. Laura and Almanzo first crossed paths when she was 15 years old. It was during a Walnut Grove, Minnesota community function when they crossed paths. Almanzo was immediately taken aback by Laura's passionate nature and boundless energy. They went from being casual acquaintances to becoming fast friends, and then into a passionate relationship. Because of their common appreciation for the country and familiarity with pioneer life, they formed an extraordinary bond. They were inseparable since they had both endured the hardships of frontier life. Their bond would weather many storms since it was built on common experiences and principles. In 1885, after dating for a while, Almanzo asked Laura to be his wife. A thrilling new phase in their lives had begun with this. As a token of his devotion, Almanzo gave Laura a stunning engagement ring and made a sincere proposal. They looked forward to their future together with much excitement during the engagement phase. Their engagement, nevertheless, was not trouble-free. Constant worries over money mirrored the harsh economic realities of pioneer life. Almanzo and Laura's love was unbreakable in the face of these challenges. In her letters, Laura frequently discussed this time, sharing her happiness and optimism about their future together. August 25, 1885 was the date of Laura and Almanzo Wilder's wedding. Mary, Laura's sister, hosted the little ceremony at her house in Smet, South Dakota. As a reflection of the spareness that defined their way of life, only a select few were present for the ceremony. There was a lot of love and warmth during the simple wedding. As evidence of her talent and ingenuity, Laura sported a stunning white frock that she had sewed herself. As a reflection of their pioneer heritage, the ceremony was small and personal. Guests enjoyed traditional meals and toasted the young couple's nuptials at a modest reception that followed the ceremony. Laura and Almanzo's wedding day would not have been the same without the help of their loved ones. With the support of their loved ones, the ceremony was meticulously planned, resulting in an absolutely unforgettable event. There were a lot of people there to celebrate this momentous occasion with Laura's family, including her parents and siblings. Laura and Almanzo's wedding exemplified the pioneering value of community solidarity. There was an abundance of love and friendship in the air as the happy couple were surrounded by loved ones who had come to celebrate with them. Their marriage started out on a positive note, but they quickly faced a number of obstacles. Their daughter, Rose Wilder Lane, was born a year after they were married. She went on to have a successful literary career. Unfortunately, tragedy struck in 1889 when Laura gave birth to a boy who only lasted for 12 days, dampening their delight. In Smet, Kingsbury County, South Dakota, this infant son of Almanzo Wilder was laid to rest, albeit he was never named. A lot of challenges arose throughout the first several years of their marriage. Almanzo became partially crippled in 1888 after contracting the deadly disease diphtheria. He never really recovered full use of his legs, although he did spend the remainder of his life reliant on a cane. The couple's mettle would be put to the test by a succession of tragedies, the first of which was this health issue. The Wilders endured a lot of tragedy, including the death of their baby son and Almanzo's health problems. A mystery fire gutted their barn, taking all of their possessions with it, and they lost a lot of money. Rose, their small daughter, inadvertently started a fire that later destroyed their home. Severe droughts added insult to injury, leaving them further indebted and unable to cultivate their 320 acres of grassland. The Wilders departed from Smet in 1890, hoping to begin over. In an effort to discover a climate that was more suited to Almanzo's health, they rested for around a year at the farm of Almanzo's parents in Spring Valley, Minnesota. They moved to Westville, Florida for a little while, but the humidity was too much, so they came back to Smet in 1892 and bought a little house, hoping for a better life. It wasn't until July 1894 that Laura and Almanzo uprooted their lives and headed for the Missouri Ozarks. There, on a rough plot of ground that would later become their home, they laid the foundation for Rocky Ridge Farm. Rocky Ridge was a tough place to start. In town, they sold wagon loads of firewood for $50, which was a pitiful income. The arrival of financial stability was sluggish. Their apple trees didn't start producing fruit for another 7 years. Laura and Almanzo kept going even as things were tough. With time, all of their efforts and perseverance paid off. From its humble beginnings as 40 acres of forested hilly terrain, Rocky Ridge Farm had grown into a 200-acre estate with a 10-room farmhouse by 1910. A more stable future was assured by using the lessons learnt at Smet and expanding their farm's product line to include poultry, dairy, and fruit production. Laura and Almanzo's bond remained strong through all of these ups and downs. It seems that their link was strengthened, not weakened, by the shared experiences they had, whether positive or negative. They rallied behind one another through thick and thin, weathering financial hardships, illness, and loss. During this time, Laura's strength and flexibility really showed. In addition to her assistance with farm management, she became well known as an expert in chicken farming and country life. Her extensive understanding of the subject matter earned her speaking engagements with several regional organizations, where she was able to impart her wisdom and insight to her audiences. Even though they had a lot of problems, their marriage wasn't all doom and gloom. Additionally, Laura and Almanzo had many happy times together. At Rocky Ridge Farm, they were able to enjoy one another's company while taking pleasure in their achievements. They were able to persevere through life's challenges and discover happiness together because of their unwavering love and mutual regard. The story of Laura Ingalls Wilder is one of inspiration, inventiveness, and unanticipated success as she goes from being a pioneer lady to being a respected novelist. Her literary career didn't start until much later in life, which just adds to her impressive list of accomplishments. Laura had an incredible, if not always easy, journey to become one of the most beloved children's authors in America. Laura took baby steps into the literary field at first. She started off by penning pieces for regional dailies and agricultural periodicals. Her years spent pioneering gave her an intimate knowledge of agricultural and rural life, which she frequently explored in her early works. Despite the lack of acclaim, she was able to refine her writing abilities and experience the thrill of having her work published through this project. Rose Wilder Lane, Laura's daughter, was the one who really pushed her to pursue writing seriously. Rose, who had made a name for herself as a writer, saw promise in her mother's tales of life on the frontier, not just as a record of the family's history, but also as tales that may interest others. She encouraged Laura to write down her memories. Laura was apprehensive at first. She wasn't sure she could write interesting stories based on her own experiences. But Laura started to put her childhood recollections on paper after receiving Rose's unending support and advice. It was a challenging procedure. It was discouraging for Laura, an aspiring novelist in her 60s, to get several rejections from publishers. Laura persisted in the face of these obstacles. Using her first-hand knowledge of pioneer life, she kept working to improve her writing. In 1932, when she was 65 years old, she finally wrote Little House in the Big Woods, the result of her perseverance. It was at this point that the cherished Little House series was born. For children's books, the release of Little House on the Prairie marked a turning point. Something new and interesting was supplied by Laura's novels. Their portrayal of pioneer life through the eyes of a youngster was a mix of fact and fantasy. This method brought the past to life for elementary school students in a manner that traditional history texts failed to do. Children may put themselves in Laura's shoes and experience the ups and downs of frontier life via these engaging and instructive novels. The first book was so popular that it sparked a series that would go on to become classics in the children's literature genre. From Wisconsin's big woods to Kansas's grasslands and the Dakota Territory, each Little House novel covered a distinct era of Laura's youth. Not only did Laura convey her own experience through these works, but she also encapsulated the essence of American pioneering in them. There were several layers of resonance for readers of the Little House novels. They highlighted the significance of community, the strength of family ties, and overcoming hardship. They also provided thrilling adventures and detailed depictions of life on the frontier. These ideas, together with Laura's kind and interesting writing style, made the novels suitable for readers of all ages. More and more people outside of the children's book industry started paying attention to the Little House series as its popularity grew. Historical authenticity and the capacity to bring the past alive for young readers were two of the book's most lauded qualities. Their usefulness as teaching aids in courses covering American history and pioneer life was quickly acknowledged. Unexpected fame and financial comfort were bestowed to Laura by the Little House novel's popularity. She and her husband Almanzo had finally achieved a comfortable lifestyle after decades of fighting for survival on the farm. Her book's royalties helped them recover from past financial hardships by providing a reliable source of income. There was some controversy around Laura's literary career, though. Her daughter Rose's role in writing the Little House novels was called into question. William Holtz, who wrote a biography of Laura, was one of many who speculated that Rose had a hand in writing the series as a ghostwriter in addition to her role as editor. Much of the rhetoric surrounding this debate centers on competing ideological readings of the Little House series. During the Great Depression, Rose Wilder Lane gained notoriety as a conservative who opposed FDR's New Deal initiatives. Some have tried to infer these political opinions from Little House novels, arguing that they advocate for a certain ideology. However, rather than ghostwriting, the available evidence points to a continuing cooperation between the mother and daughter, including edit notations in manuscripts, letters between Rose and Laura regarding the book's progress, and Laura's voluminous diaries. The fact that the Little House novels continue to be popular across many political spectrums and generations further disproves the idea that they serve as vehicles for a certain ideological ideology. The Little House books weren't the end of Laura's literary career. She kept penning pieces and essays for magazines and newspapers, with a penchant for covering agricultural and rural life. She was invited to speak at several events and meetings due to her knowledge in these areas, which allowed her influence to grow even further. Even after she passed away, Laura's literary career continued to have an influence. Since their initial publication, the Little House novels have remained in print indefinitely and have been translated into more than 40 languages. They have spawned a plethora of media adaptations, the most famous of which being a television series that brought Laura's tales to a whole new audience. Many accolades were bestowed to Laura for her work in children's books. The Newbery Medal is the highest honor bestowed by the American Library Association to a work of children's literature, and she came in second place 5 times. To honor writers and illustrators who have left an indelible mark on children's literature, the American Library Association, ALA, created the Laura Ingalls Wilder Award in 1954. Now it is called the Children's Literature Legacy Award. Laura's private life was also profoundly affected by her literary profession. She became acquainted with admirers all throughout the nation as a result of her novel's success. After her works had brought the frontier to life in print, her devoted readers would frequently go to great lengths to see the author in her latter years. Envision busloads of adoring admirers making the pilgrimage to the Wilder farmhouse in the hopes of finally meeting the real-life Laura. That's how many would visit Rocky Ridge Farm. Even with all the eyes on them, Laura and Almanzo were able to get by quite well, which was a huge improvement over the difficult times they had been through in the past. Laura was left to fend for herself for 8 years after Almanzo's sad death at the farm in 1949. Rocky Ridge Farm remained her home, and she found solace in the loving company of her neighbors and friends. Despite being without her spouse, Laura continued to be active in her own way. To stay abreast of what was happening in the world beyond her tranquil farm, she sent letters to her admirers, friends, and editors. But Laura's health started to deteriorate in 1956. She became very unwell at the age of 89 from untreated diabetes and cardiac issues. Thankfully, her daughter Rose came to her rescue and rushed her to the hospital just before Thanksgiving. Just after Christmas, Laura went home from a short hospital stay, but her health persisted in deteriorating despite her determination and the concern of those around her. Just 3 days after celebrating her 90th birthday, Laura Wilder gently died away in her sleep on February 10, 1957. A long and extraordinary life had come to an end. The town of Mansfield, where they had lived their last years together, was the site of her burial next to Almanzo's. Her physical presence may have diminished, but her daughter was determined to keep her memories alive so that the love and light she brought into the world would always be there. Despite being overshadowed by her famous mother, Rose Wilder Lane had an impressive career of her own. In her own right, Rose achieved greatness as a journalist, writer, and political philosopher. Her life is an inspiring account of innovation, personal development, and fervent support for personal freedom. Rose endured the harsh conditions of the American frontier as a child after being born on December 5, 1886, in Smet, Dakota Territory. Similar to her parents, she endured agricultural failures, sickness, and financial difficulties during her early years. Her political beliefs and the content of her writing would be influenced by these events. Rose and her mother, Laura, had a complicated and cooperative relationship. Rose was instrumental in shaping Laura's Little House books when she started to write them. Both women's careers were boosted by this partnership, according to literary historians. The Little House novels reignited Rose's creative energy, and her experience as a seasoned writer helped mold and refine her mother's stories. During her time working with this group, Rose created some of her most beloved and financially lucrative songs. Her own experiences on the frontier and the folklore of her family served as sources of inspiration for her work. The difficulties of homesteading in the Dakotas during the late 19th century were the subject of two of her novels, Free Land and Let the Hurricane Roar, which was eventually renamed Young Pioneers. The novels served as a supplement to her mother's children's books by providing an adult viewpoint on the pioneer experience. A great deal of financial success was associated with Rose's literary career. Her works were serialized in the popular magazine of the period, the Saturday Evening Post, and she was paid generously for the privilege. She was paid a huge sum of $30,000 for Freeland in 1938, which is more than $600,000 in today's money. Because of this unexpected windfall, Rose was able to pay off her debts and buy a house in the country in Danbury, Connecticut, where she would live out her days. In tandem with the success of her writing career, Rose's political beliefs were changing. She became an outspoken supporter of personal liberty and constitutional limits on government after learning to accept libertarian concepts as a result of her life experiences and observations. Her subsequent works of literature and activism were heavily impacted by her ideological change. An intriguing chapter in Rose's career unfolded during World War II. The Pittsburgh Courier, a prominent African-American newspaper from 1942 to 1945, published her weekly column. Rose was able to share her thoughts on freedom, business, and racial equality in these writings. Regarding racial relations, Rose took a stance that was ahead of her time. Racial classifications, she said, are subjective, and individual success is more important than membership in a club. The fight for personal freedom in America, she said, was similar to that of Black Americans. To drive home her points on freedom and enterprise, her editorials frequently featured the achievements of Black Americans. Rose was an influential figure in libertarian philosophy in addition to her work in journalism. Her ardent argument of personal freedom and free market economics, The Discovery of Freedom, was published in 1943. Rose was named as one of the libertarian movement's founding moms due to the publication of this book and others by Isabel Patterson and Ayn Rand the same year. There were several occasions when Rose's political views clashed with the mainstream opinion of her day. She strongly disagreed with the New Deal ideas of President Franklin D. Roosevelt because she thought they were anti-freedom and anti-individual. During the war, Rose was a vocal opponent of government action in matters such as wartime rations and Social Security, which she infamously called a phony scheme. Her opinions on these matters periodically led to confrontations with authorities. After responding negatively to a radio survey on Social Security in 1943, a state trooper came to her house to examine her motivations. Public outcry from Rose over what she saw as a violation of her free speech led to a frenzy of press coverage and the release of a booklet with the title, "What is This? The Gestapo?" Rose became increasingly firm in her political beliefs as she got older. Those who disagreed with her could perceive her advocacy of what she believed to be basic American ideals of freedom and liberty as harsh at times. Her friendship and political alliance with Isabel Patterson, among others, were strained as a result of this. Even in her latter years, Rose kept writing and editing, unfazed by the scandals that surrounded her political beliefs. For Woman's Day, she compiled an article about American needlework's past and edited her mother's journal from 1894 to publish as On the Way Home. Additionally, she never finished writing The Discovery of Freedom, but she did work on improvements. Just as Rose was about to set out on a 3-year global tour, her life was cut short on October 30th, 1968. Her legacy is as intricate and multidimensional as her life was when she peacefully died in her sleep at the age of 81. Rose Wilder Lane personified the pioneering spirit eloquently described by her parents. She was a trailblazer in the realm of ideas, always looking for new ways to think. Despite the fact that she is mostly known for her mother's Little House books, she certainly deserves credit for her own achievements. The Little House novels by Laura Ingalls Wilder transport readers to the pioneer era in a moving and realistic way. Most notably, Laura expertly combines autobiography with compelling narrative, giving history a fresh perspective from a child's perspective. The tale is both accessible and uplifting due to the detailed descriptions of the landscapes, the hardships of frontier life, and the strong bonds of family and community. The teachings of perseverance, autonomy, and the value of education that Laura imparts will also be relevant for years to come. Her genuine style and heartfelt storytelling have made the Little House novels beloved by generations of readers,